Very much. It's a delight to be in this beautiful place on this seasonably sunny day. One could say this climately warmed day. And I need to justify my presence here. One or two of you may know I've been a journalist, reporter, etc. Write. A lot of my time has been spent abroad filming over the years. I first came across climate change 50 years ago. I was in sub-Saharan Africa and I witnessed the movements of people. I witnessed the carcasses of animals. I witnessed hungry children. That was in the spring. In the autumn, about 700 miles to the east in another country, Ethiopia, I witnessed hundreds and thousands of starving people. I filmed dead children with their mothers mourning beside them. And I thought this was the result of a natural phenomenon, a natural disaster. It was not. And I discovered that not long afterwards. It was the consequence of human action, the increase in the climate temperatures, which led to dramatic and extreme changes in weather conditions, so that the rains in that part of Africa, fundamental to being able to grow a crop, had failed. Failed for 1 year, failed for the next year. And that got me thinking quite a lot. I was 25 years ago, I was at the first Earth Summit, it was called, in 1992 in Rio de Janeiro. And just in brackets, for those who don't know, worth remembering that the man more responsible than any others for formulating the agenda for that session on biodiversity and climate change was the then Prince of Wales, who convened in advance those who were reluctant to come and said, you need to come to this conference. Should not, in my view, be forgotten. At that conference, there was a huge amount of ignorance. A lot of politicians, a lot of political leaders, 150, I think, and they didn't know what they were doing, really, except that it mattered. We're now where we are, and the one thing we know is that things have got worse. And we know now, in the most latest evidence, that it looks as though we are set far earlier than we had thought to breach the 1.5 degree increase in the world's temperatures that becomes irreversible, that produces what I was talking about earlier indefinitely. I was brought up, like others I can see here, were brought up in the era of the Cold War, when we sheltered, as we thought, under a nuclear umbrella. Most of us thought it was very permanently dispiriting and unnerving. I think where we are today has the parallel effect. Even if we go about our daily lives in the normal way, we are constantly, whether we are directly engaged in being concerned or not, we are constantly aware that there is something very, very wrong that has to be put right, and has to be put right in a hurry. I won't be alive to face the consequences. Some of you won't be alive. Many of you will. Your children, my children, your grandchildren, my grandchildren will experience it. And what will they experience? They will experience global food crisis, hunger, homes and cities inundated by water, social disruption, economic disruption, and all the consequences that flow from that. Chaos and almost certainly conflict between countries and within countries that will be a form of Armageddon. I don't want to exaggerate to make the point that would be intolerable for humanity on Earth. It doesn't have to be. We can arrest that. It can be arrested. But time, as we know, is running out. What can we do, and what should we not do? Well, we should not despair. Despair is hopeless. It would help if you take an individual government, if our government and its predecessors and doubtless its successors, whichever they may be, take action. It was a good thing that our Prime Minister, in the end, decided he would go to COP as a result of public pressure. It was a good thing that our Prime Minister rejected his predecessor's enthusiasm for fracking. But he is open, government is open to the charge of hypocrisy if at the same time the government authorizes licenses to increase the output of oil and gas from Britain's coastal waters. It is a complete nonsense. It's an economic nonsense, incidentally, because it's fundamentally a lie. It isn't British oil, it's international oil. It goes straight into the international market and makes a marginal difference, as predecessor governments, conservative governments, have said and known. So that ought to be rescinded and could quite easily be rescinded with a lot of public support. The other thing that I think is not made enough of, we talk about it, we all know, you all know about it, utilizing natural resources. Whether it is water, wind, or solar. There's been much debate around COP about restitution. What should be done to support the developing countries that suffered as a consequence of the Western world's exploitation of resources and production of carbon emissions? I think there is one simple thing. The technology is there. I've spoken to the scientists. The technology is there. Huge desert areas that are perfectly capable of producing massive quantities of clean energy as a result of the sun and solar panels. It can be stored, it can be transmitted, there's nothing to stop it. What the rich world should do, all those areas where a great deal of sun is produced, should be given the opportunity, and where necessary, as in developing countries, the financial resources to make possible the production of huge amounts of free sun-given energy. Secondly, I come home. It sounds boring to lots of politicians and quite a lot of other people. It doesn't sound boring now to those who are enduring the consequences of the increase in energy prices. Home insulation. It's not difficult. It's not rocket science. We know it can be done. But the funds have to be provided. I mean, for my money, it's slightly simplistic, but not overly. The capital that has been spent and is projected to be spent on HS2 should be transferred to the creation of protection of our houses, the prevention of carbon emissions, which are a very high proportion of this country's emissions still. And then the third thing, flying. We tend to celebrate the growth of the airline industry. We should not do so. This is something that is directly in our hands. We can say, we don't have to say, I'm never going to fly, whether you're in business or whether you're for leisure. But you can say, I want to sharply reduce the level to which I exploit the ability to fly to pollute the atmosphere and poison our planet. It is interesting to hear the airline spokespeople on the radio and read them and see them on television saying, we've massively increased our efficiency of our engines. We're producing less carbon. It's perfectly true. But look at the statistics. The statistics of flight show a massive spike developing over the next 20 years of aircraft use, which increases, not decreases, the output of carbon from flying. So we can act on that. We can ask our families, our friends, say, can't we do it a bit less? Can't we do it a bit less? In the case, Bristol Airport. Bristol Airport expansion means one simple thing: more people flying, more carbon. It is perfectly possible through the local authority and elsewhere to continue to say, up with this we shall not put. So there are people here from all sorts of different organizations with different priorities, different attitudes to how you help bring this about. And no one is going to support every single means that are used. Yes, my view, demonstrate, protest, do so peacefully and within the law. That's my view, because I think you are more likely to persuade people that way. Use social media, use TikTok, use every way you can to argue the case and to demonstrate the consequences of not acting. In this country, there, Westminster, decisions in the end are made by politicians. Politicians are moved in the end still, even in our rather fragmented and sometimes broken democratic system, are moved by what electors say. So voters have power, and voters should say to their MPs of all parties, act on this, take it to Parliament, because we need to make a difference, and we can. And another thing, and I'm nearly finished. There are doubtless grandparents here, I can see one or two are very likely to be, like me, parents here, like me. And there are those who are yet to be parents, yet to be adult. All I say is, to everyone, really, for your sake, for our sake, for the future of the planet, don't give up. Thank you.